Hi, I'm Tara Moore, and in this video, we're going to talk about that voice of self-doubt that all of us have in our heads. I don't know what yours is saying to you. Its lines vary for each of us, but I often hear things from women like, you don't belong in this room. You're not smart enough. If that were a good idea, someone else would have done it already. You're about to make a fool of yourself. Do more homework about that before you try it out or say anything about it. Sometimes the inner critic shows up more personally about our bodies or how we're aging, or that person who we want to be friends with doesn't want to be our friend. It can chatter about all those things too. And it certainly can talk to us about how we are as parents or as daughters. It can speak on all the different areas in our lives. So today we're going to consider what would be possible in your life if you were less affected by that voice. What would be possible if it didn't just have to be how things sounded in your head, but you had a new way of dealing with it that allowed you to be propelled forward and the dreams and the longings and the desires to create that are really most important to you? This is what I think of as the beginning of a kind of inner critic 101 training. And I think we all need an inner critic 101 training. It kind of astounds me when I think back to school and I think, well, someone even taught me in school how to balance a checkbook. And we certainly learned how to do like all kinds of math equations and we memorized all this historical facts. But something that's so fundamental to allowing us to use the knowledge we have is knowing how to manage our own self-doubt or inner critic voice. And most of us never learned that. So we're going to start to play catch up and get that 101 training. So, what is the inner critic? When I started coaching women, first of all, I was really surprised by the level of self doubt and self criticism I heard in them because, like most women, I thought it was just me. I thought I was the one having those kind of thoughts in my head, and other women seemed a lot more confident. But person after person, they would share those kinds of mean to themselves thoughts. And then I thought, what happened in our early childhoods that all caused us to have this lack of confidence? Because I had been raised with that narrative that, if you have supportive people in your life and you're in a good environment, you're somehow going to come out of the end of that process confident. And even more so if you've achieved things, or maybe you've been a good student, right? Then all those things are going to build your confidence. So you're going to come out into adulthood even blazingly more confident. But this was not what the data I was seeing lined up with. I knew for myself, I had plenty of reasons to feel confident. I happened to be the kind that I was a good student type. I was doing well in my early jobs in my career. And yet I found I was so timid and so scared about really sharing my voice or taking any kind of risks to share my ideas in my workplace. And then I looked at my early coaching clients, and they had such similar inner critics. That voice of self doubt was really similar in all of them. But the early environment that those clients had been in was quite different. So it's like, well, this one had really supportive parents and was a straight A student. This one had really kind of parents who were not really very encouraging or reinforcing of her accomplishments. And she really struggled in school and struggled to even pass classes. And the two of them have kind of come out of all of that with a very similar inner critic voice. And so my narrative that what happened in our early childhood must have caused some problem in confidence, and therefore we need to fix things in that way, that was really being dispelled over and over and over again by the women I was meeting with and the actual stories that they were sharing with me. But I did really notice another pattern. And that pattern was that when they were taking a risk towards their own playing bigger, or when they were even thinking about in the future doing that, maybe I'll apply for that job. Maybe I'll go for that tough grad school program. Maybe I'll start sharing my ideas online through some posts. Whatever that playing bigger step was they were contemplating, the inner critic would come up with fury, super, super loud, and eventually intimidate them back into their comfort zone. And the more I started to listen to them and experiment with what tools worked to actually help them quiet that inner critic voice, the more pronounced I could see that pattern. That when something threatened our sense of safety, our internal comfort zone, because it was some kind of risk toward our playing bigger, self doubt would flare up. And years later, after all that experimentation and thinking, here's how I've come to think about the inner critic. that the inner critic is actually a strategy that our safety instinct is using to try to get us to stay in our comfort zone. So let me break that down a little bit and we'll talk about the different components of that definition. So, what do I mean by our safety instinct? The safety instinct is the part of us that is really concerned with possible threats and dangers. And often this is theorized to be one of the oldest parts of our brain. It's connected to that reptilian part of the brain that came earliest in human brain development. So, in that sense, it's a very instinctual, basic part of the psyche that is really scanning the environment all the time. Is there a danger? Is there a threat? And then what's going to be my response to make sure I'm safe? And what a lot of psychologists and neurobiologists talk about now and emphasize because it's so critical to how we're experiencing our contemporary lives is that the safety instinct, even though it was designed to help us flee a physical danger, it goes off when we encounter an emotional danger. So when we experience something that we think might bring failure or rejection, or we're worried it's going to make us stand out from the crowd too much, maybe it's going to bring criticism. Maybe it just is going to make us be more visible and more vulnerable to other people's feedback. Maybe it's just a change. It's going to bring a change. Any of those things could be perceived as a threat. And this whole system that was designed to help us avoid any possible threats kicks into gear. So you can imagine that when you want to apply for a stretch job, or you want to put your artwork out there for the world to see, or you want to share a post with your thinking about your industry online, or perhaps you want to ask for a new role at work or a different work schedule, or any of those things that might feel like a bit of a risk, your safety instinct says, why the heck would we do that? That's not squarely in the comfort zone. No, 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 no. But if your safety instinct were to raise its hand and say, hi, I'm your safety instinct. I don't want you to do that because that might involve some risks. Stay in your comfort zone. If it were to do that so transparently, you would say, no, thank you. No, thanks. I am doing something that's important to me. I think there could be a good outcome from that. I'm going to go ahead anyway. And so instead, your safety instinct, it's like it puts on a costume. And the costume is that inner critic voice. Because if it says you're about to make a fool of yourself, you don't know what you're talking about. Who the hell do you think you are? No one in here wants to hear from you. You're too old, you're too young, you're too this, right? If it says those, it will intimidate you back into your comfort zone. The problem with all this is that the safety instinct in you really has one goal: to help you survive and to keep you safe. But in our contemporary lives, most of us want to also feel fulfillment and achieve things we want to achieve and continue to grow and to connect and to be ourselves. That's all more in the category of thriving. And thriving takes some different things than surviving. So our survival instinct is programmed to be very, very overreactive. Let's avoid any possible threat. And so if anything we want to do in order to thrive involves some of that risk, it's going to try and get us to stop. That's really what your inner critic is. It's not a voice of truth. It's not really even about some character flaw that you didn't get confidence. It is your safety instinct speaking up over and over again in this kind of disguised way to try and get you to retreat into your comfort zone. And if that's what it is, it's not going anywhere. Because the safety instinct we are hardwired to have. The safety instinct is not a part of us we can delete. We can only learn to respond to it differently. So that's why we are not, in my work, in the Playing Big model, we're not trying to become confident. We are trying to learn a new relationship with self-doubt. We are trying to get wiser and more effective in how we respond to that voice of self-doubt, knowing it's going to be along with us in our lifetimes. So for the moment, for this conversation, this lesson, I want you to just sit with that idea for a little bit because it's a really different one for a lot of us. And there's a few important parts of that idea. Number one, that this is not you. Your inner critic voice is not you. It is a voice within you. And we're going to learn to listen to the other parts of us. Number two, that it's not a voice of truth. It's this distorted thing that is really the safety instinct trying so hard to get its way. And number three, that means we don't graduate from having the inner critic, but instead, our best bet is to find these new ways of responding to it so that we're not run by its voice. So simmer with those ideas, try them on, notice, just start to notice, oh, when am I hearing that voice of self-doubt or self-criticism? Make a practice of the noticing. And when we come back in the next video, we're going to talk about what that means for what we actually do when we are having a voice of self-doubt, how we respond. We're going to talk about what are the practices we can use in the moment that really help us move forward differently in our lives. Thanks for listening.